Hello students, today we are going to talk about the cultural contributions of Mughal rulers with the aim to give a brief outline of the various contributions of the Mughals in India, which would help us in understanding the cultural, political, social and economic conditions of that time. Muslim rule in India is always depicted in the darkest possible colors, and Muslim rulers are almost invariably described as tyrants and bloodthirsty monsters, whose unrestrained autocracy found its full expression in fanaticism, in the forcible propagation of Islam, in the oppression of Hindus, in the destruction of their temples and in the suppression of their genius. But there is enough in the existing literature on Indo-Islamic history to show that the Muslim kings of India were great conquerors, endowed with uncommon military genius. But there is a very little in it to convey the least idea that they were also gifted with a keen zest for social life and gentle arts, and that their victories in the art of peace were no less remarkable than their achievements in the science of war. The present is an endeavor to reveal the cultural aspects of their rule, and from the ensuing account, it will be evident that they made mighty contributions to almost every department of Indian life and thought. So mighty, in fact, that during the millennium of their rule in India, they worked a complete revolution in the life and thought of their people. The political or territorial expansion of the Commonwealth of Islam went apace, and the standards of Islam, bearing the emblem of crescent, were carried far and wide by Muslims under the ennobling influence of their religion. With the conquest of Persia and the transfer of the seat of government to Baghdad, Persian ideas and ideals began to flow fast into the rank and file of followers of Islam, changing their spiritual outlook into one material. Coming into close contact with the Persians, the denizens of the desert, as the Arabs are significantly called, took an extraordinary fancy to the ideas of the former. The conquerors were literally conquered by the culture of the conquered people. They took such a fancy to the culture of the Persians that in their eager fascination for it, they did not even try to pick and choose from the Persian ideas, but assimilated them wholesale in almost every department of administration and in every aspect of their social life. From Baghdad, these ideas of kingship travelled into Ghazni, as also to other parts of the world, and thence made their way into India with the march of Muslims into that country. India, an ancient country like Persia, offered a most favorable field for the civilization or cultivation of such ideas. Here, the submissiveness of the people and the ancient tradition of the country furnished a most congenial atmosphere for the establishment of absolute monarchy. The Muslim kings thus are credited for a number of important influence in the state, administrative system, social life, religion, education, architect, gardening, painting, poetry and music. Talking about the state, the familiar custom of holding what are now called darbars has been popular in Persia from times immemorial. In India, it became a permanent institution during the first 50 years of Muslim period. The sultans of Delhi held darbars on a number of public occasions, such as the coronation of a monarch, the commemoration of a victory or an important event, the consummation of the marriage, or a royal prince or princess, the celebration of the birth of a baby or the anniversary of a member of the royal family. There were other darbars, popularly known as jashns, which were held to celebrate certain social and religious festivals and were noted for pomp and pageantry, culminating in a lavish distribution of robes of honor and rewards. Secondly, we talk about the administrative system. The empire was divided into a number of provinces, each of which was usually known by the name of the country of its capital. A province was therefore the biggest administrative division. It was placed in the charge of a trusted officer who acted as a viceroy of the king in it. Each viceroy employed a large number of subordinate officials for the effective administration of the province. Further, talking about law and justice, there were no such courts of law and justice as exist in these days. The king was the fountain of justice and his was the highest court of appeal. The Qazis settled the cases among the Muslims in accordance with the Shariat, and civil disputes related to the inheritance, succession, etc. Among the Hindus were allowed to be decided by the Hindu judges or panchayats. The Muslim kings were noted for their impartiality in judicial matters. The Muslim kings maintained a well-organized police force in order to enforce law and order and to facilitate impartial dissemination of justice. The Kotwal or the police-in-chief was the custodian of the public peace and security. Further, on the government service was not the monopoly of the ruling race. It was open to all, Hindus and Muslims, who possessed the required qualification. Muslim kings also showed a remarkable interest in the upkeep and development of means of communication and transport, and the result was a widespread network of roads and highways in Muslim Empire. Coming to the third point, social life. Many Muslim kings were sincerely interested in the social as well as moral well-being of their subjects, irrespective of the sects to which they belonged or the creeds they professed. They forbade drinking and gambling and tried their best to suppress immorality. The horrible and inhumane practice of sati and infanticide, which had eaten up into the foundation of Hindu society, was systematically discouraged and forbidden, and widow remarriage was legalized. Another result of the Hindu contact with Muslim was the Mohammedan dress. Etiquette and ritual came into fashion in the Indian society. Achkan and salwar, popular dress in northern India, was introduced in the Hindu society under the Mughal influence. Muslim nobles, feudal lords and aristocrats, generally leading a more luxurious life than Hindus, set new fashions which were copied by the rich Hindu classes. Recreational activities were influenced by Islamic contact. Hunting, hawking and many other games also became Mohammedanized. Religious influence. Toleration in true sense was the sheet anchor of Muslim rule in India, and the Muslim kings never interfered with the religion of their non-Muslim subjects. They enjoined not only liberty of thought and freedom of worship, but also admitted them to all powers and privileges which they enjoyed themselves. The place that woman occupies and the privilege she enjoys in Muslim society in accordance with the commands of Quran are in nowhere inferior to those of men. Men and women are equally indispensable for each other. The Parda system was also introduced in this country by the Muslims. It was a sin for a woman to appear in public, and hence Parda was a religious duty. Talking about education, no medieval government had a regular department of public instruction, but Muslim India of the Middle Ages could justly boast of possessing one which looked after religious as well as educational institutions. Hardly was there a Muslim prince of importance whose name is not associated with the opening and endowing of a school or a college in his kingdom. Muslim kings, as a rule, took a living interest in the education of their subjects. Education made mighty strides during the Muslim period, so much so in fact that Muslim universities of medieval India were thronged by thousands of students and professors had often hundreds of hearers. Apart from houses where individual instructors imparting education received remuneration from their pupils in the form of personal service. The principal types of educational institutes were universities, madrasas and maktabs. While there were universities in capital cities and maktabs and madrasas in smaller towns, no village was without a mosque and no mosque was without a maktab and a modest library. Mosques were not restricted to ibadat or divine worship alone, but were also used as lecture halls and places of instruction. Further on, technical education was given in karkhanas or workshops through the system of apprenticeship. The boys who did not attend a maktab or a madrasa were sent to these workshops for receiving necessary training in art and crafts. Arabic, the language of the Quran, was a compulsory subject in almost all schools and colleges, and Persian, the language of the court, was the medium of instruction. Before the advent of Islam in Indian education was the monopoly of Brahmins, who, for the reason of their own, refused to impart it to the masses. But under the Muslim rule of India, whose religion recognized no barriers of rank or race in the acquisition of knowledge, it therefore became the birthright of every citizen, Muslim as well as Hindu. One of the great results of this mutually reciprocal understanding and intercourse of Hindus and Muslims, facilitated by the liberal educational policy of Muslim king, was the creation of a new language, Urdu, the offspring of Persian and Hindu, which in course of time superseded its parents and became the lingua franca of northern India. There existed separate maktabs for the education of girls, but usually they received their education in the same school where the boys did. Of course, up to the primary standard when sexual consciousness had not yet awakened, and after that they were segregated from them and given their education either privately or in the schools especially provided for them. A short reference may also be made here to the libraries which sprang up in India as a beneficial result of the love of learning of most of the Muslim rulers and became a valuable asset to the sacred cause of education. Muslim kings and other men of means used to collect rich stores of literature for their own use and build up big libraries which figured prominently among their proud possessions. There were libraries which were thrown open to all and availed of by the public in general. In passing, we may also point out that it was the Muslims who brought paper into India about the 10th century AD and popularized the use of it. Talking about architecture, the medieval period saw great developments in the field of architecture. With the coming of Muslims to India, many new features came to be introduced in buildings. There was gradually a harmonious blending between the Hindu and Muslim architectural styles, and this new style of architecture is known as Indo-Islamic. The fundamental Islamic dogma is the unity of God or Allah, and it is the requirement for prayer that constitute the prime progenitor of architect in Islam. The most important buildings in Islam are religious in function like the mosques and tombs, or secular like the palaces and halls. Indo-Islamic style is usually divided into three phases: the Delhi Sultanate or Pushtun style, the provincial, and the Mughal phase. The mode, theme or motif or ornamentation employed in Islamic buildings also made a departure from the earlier vogues. The Hindu style or ornamentation is largely naturalistic, showing human and animal forms and the luxuriant vegetation life. As among the Muslim, the representation of living beings was taboo by way of decoration or ornamentation. They introduced geometrical and arabesque patterns, ornamental writing, and formal representation of plants and floral life. In short, the contribution of Muslims to Indo-Muslim architecture is profound and no less interesting. Among the architectural features introduced by them, mention may be made of arches, domes, minars, and minarets, the pendentive squinch arc, half-domed double portals, kiosks or chhatris, and the use of concrete as a factor of construction. They also introduced gilding and painting in varied color and designs. Muslim decorative elements are usually of the nature of embroidery. Thus, the Indo-Islamic architecture is entirely different in character from the Muslim architecture in other countries, incorporating the best of both Hindu and Muslim styles. Coming next to gardens, the garden design was another secular art much cultivated by the Mughals. The Bagh or gardens of Mughal are world famous. Some of these formal gardens can still be seen in Kashmir. The idea underlying their gardens was the fact the creation of a Iram, that is paradise, and the realization of the object on the earth. With high-walled enclosure, redolent with fragrant flowers, gaily plumaged birds, a captured stream running through the garden in rhythmic harmony, arcing trees sheltering the spring flowers, and a tank in the middle reflects the flower beds around. The legendary paradise was fully attained, and nothing beautiful that could be conceived by the human mind seems to have been left wanting. Symmetry was the keynote of the Mughal art of gardening and the guiding principle of Mughal gardeners. Balance, harmony, and precision were evident everywhere in the Mughal gardens. Coming next to painting, the art of painting did not receive the attention and encouragement which other arts did at the hands of the early Muslim kings of India. This was mainly because it was tabooed in early days of Islam on account of its close association with idolatry. It was only occasionally that Muslim kings and nobles broke away from the general convention and practiced this art. The Mughal school of painting was therefore the most significant contribution of Akbar. He established a state altar where about 100 artists, mostly Hindu, worked under the guidance of two Persian masters brought to India by Humayun. Early in Akbar's reign, the Portuguese had established trading posts in India. As gifts for emperor, they brought illustrated Bibles and religious pictures which so fascinated Akbar that he immediately instructed his own painters to emulate their qualities. Thus, European realism was added to the embryonic Mughal style. A number of miniatures even depict Christian subjects. Closely connected with the art of painting is the art of illuminating books, which received a great stimulus in India under the influence of Islam. Muslims have always been very fond of illuminating manuscripts of the Quran and other religious and classical literature with beautiful gold borders on every page and of having their bindings adorned with gold. While we are speaking about books, we may appropriately make a short reference to calligraphy. The art of writing a beautiful hand had been very widely cultivated by Muslims even since their advent in India. The state encouraged this art and employed a large number of scribes for copying books, etc. Coming next to poetry, poetry has been a most important and popular subject among Muslims from the very early days. Their love of beauty found full scope and a most suitable expression in this art. Some practiced it as a profession, while others resorted to it as a relaxation for other pursuits. Poetry, like painting and other fine arts, reached the pinnacle of its glory under the patronage of the great Mughals, almost all of whom were poets of distinction, widely interested in the promotion of poetry. Poetry, as well as prose, both of which were liberally encouraged by Muslim kings and other well-to-do lovers of learning, acted as it were a conduit pipe through which the ideals of Islam and Islamic culture were diffused in India among non-Muslims. Music. The contact of Islam with Iran, where music was most popular, and the influence of Sufis, who believed in the efficacy of music as a means of elevating the soul and as an aid to spiritual progress, brought about a great change in the attitude of Muslims toward this art and went a long way in wiping off the stigma attached to it. The position was further simplified when Muslims settled down in India and found music occupying a high place in the scheme of Hindu social and religious life. The result was that though divine service in mosque continued to be performed on orthodox lines without extraneous aids of music, either vocal or instrument, the art became so popular that musicians began to loom large on almost all festive occasions. The Sufis' fondness of music brought into vogue and practice of holding semi-religious congregations where songs of divine love called qawwalis were sung by professional singers called qawwals. Dancing was equally popular and pursued with remarkable zeal. It had developed its own technique. It was necessary corollary to music. So much so that it was difficult to imagine a music party unaccompanied by dancing. Dancers had their own peculiar dresses suiting their arts. There were regular dancing girls who could be engaged for music parties. The Devdasis are too well known to call for a special notice. Music, in short, was most popular in Muslim India more than we are led to believe. One reason for its popularity may be found in the fact that vast majority of Indian Muslims were originally Hindus or offsprings of Hindus who were too fond of it to give it up after embracing Islam, with the result that the art imperceptibly permeated Muslim ranks and became widely popular. Therefore, to conclude, we can say that political topics such as the state and the system of administration, social subjects such as slavery, status of women, parda system, games and recreations, feasts and festivals, etc., social legislation aiming at the suppression of sati and infanticide among the Hindus and of immorality, gambling and drinking among the people in general, some of the teachings of Islam and their influence on Hindu religious thought and practice, and some economic features such as encouragement of famine relief, construction of canals and well for purpose of irrigation, etc., are some other subjects of interest and importance which bring out the culture of Indian Muslim kings and their contribution to the cultural heritage of India. The achievements of Muslim kings in various departments of life may not be equal to those of their preceptors of Arabia, but they were certainly superior to those of contemporary crowned heads of other cities and countries. The fact they were able to establish their rule in the country so rich in resources and inhabited by such warlike races as the Rajputs, and govern it with remarkable success for so many centuries with the cooperation and support without offending the susceptibilities of provoking any reaction of the people over whom they ruled, in a glowing tribute to the refined side of their file and a good testimony to the national character of their government. It will be only when the annals of their history are stripped of the passion and prejudice of generations and purged of the communal hatred they have been stored with, that their noble efforts at establishing peace and a popular government based on the acquiescent goodwill of the people of all classes and creeds in a disturbed and caste-ridden country will be appreciated and their real place in history determined. Thus, with this we come to the end of this lecture, and I hope you all must have got a clear and a brief idea of various cultural contributions of the Mughal rulers in India. Thank you.